All right, good afternoon, everyone. I think we're going to start with Alderman Taliaferro. This is a great day. We're very excited about opening up this new area. Chairman?
Thank you, Mayor. Good afternoon, everyone. Let me start by saying this. Nothing out there is more stronger and more powerful than when we stand together. From block clubs and faith groups to businesses and school communities, Chicagoans from every neighborhood and background are coming together not only to unite against violence, but also in support of those with COVID-19 and to stop the spread of COVID-19. Since day one, Mayor Lightfoot has been clear that the city's public safety strategy must represent an all-hands-on-deck approach. Part of that effort must be ensuring that our officers and our detectives have resources to support, resources of support and space to do their jobs effectively. That's why I applaud her today for the investments she's making today to support our officers and detectives by bringing them closer to the neighborhoods they serve. I want to thank Mayor Lightfoot for her continued leadership when it comes to public safety and look forward to expanding on today's investment over the next weeks, months, and years. And with that, I present to you the Mayor of the City of Chicago, Mayor Lori E. Lightfoot.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
And thank you, Chairman Taliaferro, for that generous introduction, but also for your unwavering support of our first responders, including the Chicago Police Department. Good afternoon, everyone. Before I begin the formal program, I have some sad news to announce. Yesterday, the Chicago Transit Authority lost its 4th employee to COVID-19 virus. The individual was a veteran of the CTA, having worked in the CTA's technology department for over 20 years. As President Carter himself noted, this employee was a consummate public servant who was fully committed to the mission and goals of the CTA and our city and making sure that commuters could travel safely on the CTA. Our hearts go out to the employee's family, friends, and the entire CTA community during this devastating time. It's not easy standing here and announcing yet another death amongst our city workforce. But with each passing from COVID-19, this incident is yet another reminder of how we need to continue to be cautious and stay safe, and also thank those essential workers who are out there every single day working hard to make sure that this city remains strong and vibrant, even in this difficult time. The gains we've made in this crisis are encouraging, but we are still nowhere where we need to be in making sure that not only we've contained the spread of COVID, but that we see a decrease in a number of people who are affected on a daily basis. That's why we continue to stick to our plan and stick to the science and the data that's been driving our response to this pandemic all along. And that means, of course, staying home and saving lives. Now, today, I am proud to join leaders of the Chicago Police Department, along with Alderman Taliaferro, Alderman Scott, and I want to thank the members of the Chicago City Council who voted on a budget last year that put the resources in place to make this day a reality. We are here in announcing the opening of 2 additional police areas in our police department, bringing the total number of areas to 5. This restructuring will not only streamline operations across the police department, but it will give district commanders greater access to the resources they need, as well as increase collaboration between detectives and patrol officers, all of which is part of our broader mission to bring more officers and detectives into the communities that they serve, strengthen neighborhood policing across our city, and increase operational efficiency that creates real, widespread, and lasting public safety. In reshaping CPD into 5 areas, district patrol, area detectives, gang investigation teams, narcotics teams, and area saturation teams will now fall under the authority of a single deputy chief. This will not only improve internal communication across CPD, but also create a culture of accountability. making it easier for all operations within each area to work together and fight crime on a larger, more coordinated scale. Today's expansion will boost the effectiveness of the former Bureau patrol teams that work out of the police areas, helping support our specialized gang and saturation teams to blanket the city and safeguard every neighborhood, and better position them to mobilize and respond quickly to scenes, providing more robust public safety presence in the communities that need them most. These reforms were shaped in part by the recommendations of the Bureau of Justice Assistance, as well as the Police Executive Research Forum, who did a study of policing here in Chicago and specifically focus on the work of the detective division. Following last year's review of CPD's homicide investigation process, one of the key recommendations for the BJA and PERF was a redrawing of the area boundaries to balance case volume among the 5 areas. And we took their advice to heart. While our expansion plan was in the works prior to the report, it only reinforced the efforts that we knew were important to make sure that important resources were available at the district level to make sure that our district commanders were able to respond in a nimble fashion to the challenges that they were facing in public safety. That's why today's measures also redistribute more than 900 detectives working in the original 3 areas across the new total 5. In the process, alleviating caseloads and allowing detectives to have an increased focus on the cases they are assigned to. To bring these reforms home even further, we also rehab the facilities that house the original Area 4 and Area 5. Updating them over the past few months to best fit the needs of our detectives and specialized teams. And I want to credit a number of people, but particularly Chief Dinahan, for being very much involved and helping shape what these areas were going to look like to make sure that they were able and equipped to respond to modern policing and technology. As important as these reforms are, our work is far from over. My goal, and everyone here, is to make sure that Chicago is the safest big city in America. Today's measures are just one more step in that effort, putting us in a greater position for our dedicated police officers to do the work they love and putting our city much closer to being the safe and secure place everyone can be proud to call home. So I want to thank everyone who was involved in making this day a reality. I want to make sure that our men and women have the tools that they need to be successful in the work that they're doing every day on behalf of the citizens that they took an oath to serve and protect. And with that, I invite Superintendent Brown to the podium. And I got to say, I like saying Superintendent Brown.
Thank you so much, Mayor Lightfoot and Alderman Taliaferro. Thank you so much for your dedication to public service. I'm delighted to be here today on the west side of Chicago. The new Area 4 is a testament to the Chicago Police Department's commitment to improving the quality of life in the neighborhoods we serve. For too long, the residents within the 10th, 11th, and 15th districts had to share resources. Today, we are here not just to cut a ribbon, but to make good on a commitment to this community and beyond. The addition of Area 4 and Area 5 puts police officers closer to everyday Chicagoans. It makes it easier for witnesses and victims to interact with detectives and put specialized police teams nearby and ready to respond. Adding these 2 operation areas is the culmination of the department's reorganization that began under Charlie Beck. The interim superintendent took an outsider's view of CPD and saw a disconnect. He saw a disconnect between patrol officers, detectives, and units that focus on gangs, guns, and drugs. This meant there was a disconnect between those who respond to calls, those working to hold offenders accountable, and those who conduct special operations. The new area structure breaks down these silos and creates greater accountability as each area now reports directly to a deputy chief. These deputy chiefs also work directly with a group of district commanders, keeping them grounded within the needs of the community while maintaining their focus on the overall goal of improving public safety. These changes speak to an ambitious goal. I want Chicago to become the safest big city in the country, bar none. Others might be afraid to speak of such lofty goals for fear of falling short. Many laughed when John F. Kennedy announced the May 25, 1961 goal of putting a man on the moon. But I strongly believe in striving for more, a moonshot goal. Chicagoans deserve policing excellence. And we won't make excuses, and we won't have fear in putting goals that are lofty in our goal achievements. Thank you so much, Mayor. Thank you so much, Alderman, for your support. And I want to turn it over to Chief of Operations, Fred Waller, for comments. Fred?
Thank you, Superintendent Brown. Thank you, Mayor, Alderman. This announcement today plays an important role with CPD's Bureau of Operations. Our operational functions primarily work within the 22 districts throughout the city. Each of these districts are now placed within one of the 5 new areas. A deputy chief oversees each area, which includes about 4 to 5 districts. The deputy chief also oversees, as you've heard, several area-wide teams. This includes gang investigations, area saturation and gang teams, and also narcotic enforcement teams. These special teams have been operating out of CPD's 3 areas to provide a blanket of protection throughout the city. The 2 additional areas will allow these teams to be even more responsive, particularly on the west side. At a moment's notice, these teams can now mobilize to crack down on crime in any particular area. Being able to respond quickly can also help calm the nerves of residents upset by an uptick in crime or providing a calming presence following a particular alarming incident. Detectives under this area, detectives are under this umbrella, as well. The idea here is to put everyone together for better collaboration. Breaking down these silos allows operations and detectives to work together to solve more cases and hold offenders more accountable. The newly renovated offices also make officers feel appreciated. I am so impressed by the work done in these buildings and happy to see them return to their intended use. I believe the new areas will play a major factor in our 2020 summer safety plan and beyond. The people of Chicago deserve to have their police officers nearby, and these new areas will do just that. And now I'll turn it over to Chief of Detectives, Brendan Debenham.
Thank you. Thanks, Superintendent, Mayor, Chief Waller. When Area 4 and Area 5 closed in 2013, I heard from numerous detectives and patrol officers that lamented the decision. Then and now, these hardworking officers recognize the value of having officers and detectives closer to the communities we are sworn to serve and protect. Bringing these areas back online makes it more convenient for witnesses and victims to access detectives, as well as state's attorneys and others in the investigatory process. Likewise, detectives are now closer to crime scenes, which means improved response times. Specialized patrol units, as the chief mentioned, such as gang investigations, area saturation, and narcotics enforcement teams, are also able to respond more quickly by being located in these new areas. I believe putting all these operational and investigatory resources in the same building will encourage collaboration and creativity as well. Area Deputy Chief Cato, over to my right, he's going to be tasked with overseeing this new structure. Other improvements in supervision are part of this reorganization as well. There's now a dedicated lieutenant and sergeants in each area that focus solely on homicide investigations. All of these changes are made with the goal of solving more crimes, responding quickly to calls for service, and making every neighborhood safer. The new areas have each been given a facelift, as you can see, with new computers, desks, phones, and more. These areas also have both been equipped with area technology centers to assist in solving investigations. These tech hubs are already being used by detectives in the existing areas to easily access video from a variety of surveillance systems. The ATCs are being paid for with the help of local philanthropist Ken Griffin, so I want to thank him for his generous support again. As for staffing these areas, CPD looked at criminal complaints and calls for service throughout the city. The areas with the most need were given the most resources. It's just that simple. I'm thankful that these resources will be available as we head into the summer months. Thank you, and if you have any questions, I'm going to turn it back over to the mayor at this time.
Notice how the chief punted all questions to me. Thanks, Brendan. How are you? Please.
I'll start with everyone else's questions, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Carol Eggers from NBC asks, what is the impact, what impact is the continued violence having on the city's efforts to stop the spread of the virus?
Well, I'll start and then I'll invite the superintendent to weigh in. Look, it's a very difficult time to police. When we see the infrastructure for public safety in the city being directly impacted by COVID, and by that I mean the courts, right? They've really shrunk their footprint over the course of this pandemic. Same thing with the state's attorney. And the jails, we know, have really been having some challenges with making sure that both detainees and the staff are safe. So the normal things that we rely upon to partner with the Chicago Police Department in this difficult time, those resources are just not available in the same abundance that they normally are. And yet, our men and women show up every single day. The other challenge is that we have to keep our force, the first responders, safe. And we know the numbers. They have not been immune from contracting this terrible virus. And unfortunately, we've seen some deaths as well. So being able to continue to keep neighborhoods safe in a time of this pandemic when gun violence has not taken a rest, that is a challenge that I think this department understands well, and I think are meeting under the superintendent's leadership. I don't want to jinx it and knock on wood, but the men and women who are here are dedicated, they are committed, they are fighting hard every single day, but it is no doubt the challenge of a lifetime to be able to police and respond to public safety in this difficult time. And Supa, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Just quickly, Chicagoans should be proud of the men and women of Chicago Police Department and their dedication and commitment to protecting Chicagoans. In spite of the challenges we're facing with COVID, officers are dedicated to having an increased presence, to put themselves in harm's way in dispersing large gatherings. These men and women are obviously facing danger and doing it in a way that we all should be very, very proud of. And I want to message to them in the room especially, thank you so much for your work. Thank you so much for your dedication. Thank you so much for your commitment to Chicagoans and protecting this city and pushing to become the safest city in the country.
Superintendent, this next question is from Fran Spielman and directed to you as well, if you don't mind.
Sure.
In light of your mention for the moonshot, I think this is similar to that question. Superintendent, you've told your top deputies that your goal is to hold homicides to under 300 this year. Is that a realistic goal considering the fact that Chicago ended last year just under 500? If it is realistic, how do you intend to accomplish it?
Regardless of the number, and I don't want to belabor the point on whatever number it is to become the safest city in the country, our goal is policing excellence. Our goal is exceptionalism in policing. Our goal is building trust in the community. And we are dedicated to achieving that goal in a way where Chicagoans can be proud of its police department. That's our goal, and we make no apologies for that goal. The gold standard in policing should be synonymous with Chicago as we proceed in achieving our moonshot.
Mayor, this is from Chris Ty at Channel 2. Can you address the question of the costs of reopening both of these new areas?
Yeah, this was part of our budget that was approved by City Council last fall. It's about $3.7 million. And I must give credit also to Chief Waller for his insights in helping open up and design these. And of course, the Department of AIS, the old 2FM, previously Fleet, and building management. But Commissioner David Reynolds and his team have been invaluable partners in making sure that this work was done in response to the needs of the police department. So they were very hands-on in helping really design, working with the architect and interior designers to make sure we got this right. So these were working stations and environments that work for the police department. So. But the budget issue, that was approved as part of last year, the vote last year for 2020.
How does the opening of the areas interact with the consent decree requirements as part of community policing requirements?
Well, I'm not sure that the areas themselves do, but one of the benefits, as I think all the superintendent and the two chiefs talked about, is we had a 3-area system that literally divided up the large expanse of the city into 3 areas. It was too big. It wasn't functionally working, I think, as effectively as it could be. It was important to make sure that the areas were not just 5, but that the configuration of them made sense based upon data and crime patterns. So that was a lot of the thinking about, how do we make the areas more contiguous and responsive to the neighborhood needs. We had an area, for example, that stretched from our western boundary all the way to the lakefront. So if you were on the lakefront and something happened and you needed to go all the way to the west side, given normal traffic patterns, that could be an hour or more before detectives could be on the ground and on the scene. So I hope, and I think it's the objective here, is that by having these right size, opening up more areas, and then it'll cut down on the travel time. Detectives and police officers will have more interaction with each other. There's a lot of synergies, and I think intelligence that will be generated by having that closer interaction. And then, of course, having district commanders having more tools at their disposal in addressing the public safety needs in their particular districts.
This also from Chris Ty. We understand the new areas will receive area technology centers, tech hubs already in place at the 3 existing detective areas that will help investigators more quickly access surveillance, camera footage after a shooting or other crime. What kinds of new surveillance technology is being deployed?
Well, I'll start, and then I might invite Chief Dinahan to speak to this issue. But the ATCs, the area tech centers, have really been a fantastic tool for the detectives. Prior to having this technology embedded in the areas, having the analysts that understood how to use that technology and then help that feed that out to the area detectives, we were seeing, for example, videos coming from lots of different sources and lots of different formats, and it would take hours, if not days, to be able to upload them, access it. Now we've shrunk that time dramatically, and I won't steal Chief's thunder, but there have been a lot of crimes that have been solved much more quickly as a result of having that technology at the ready for our detectives. Chief?
Sure. So just to follow up on what the mayor said, it's the detectives in the areas, the way you phrased the question, nobody's surveilling anybody. It's actually building more trust, as the superintendent mentioned, with the community. So when something happens, the detectives go out there, and as the mayor mentioned, there's all kinds of different systems that are involved. Some people still have systems that are 20 years old. Some places have new systems. There's obviously City of Chicago cameras, and this room is able to go out there, get the information quickly, give it to those shooting and homicide detectives in order to, once again, just develop the information as quickly as possible so they can apprehend an offender. So that's the goal, and now they're achieving it by having the software and the technology available to go out and do it in an expedient manner. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you. Mayor, question from Mary Ann Ahern at Channel 5. In New York today, the governor and the mayor announced that they will suspend mass transit for a deep cleaning overnight each day. Are there any similar plans here?
You know, I heard about that. We don't have any current plans to do that. Look, I think one of the things that challenges all of us is, and I think New York did what they did in reaction to the homelessness population that uses mass transit. We've been very committed to making sure that we're reaching out to members of the homeless community that are traveling on mass transit. There's a regular cadence of outreach to them led by our Department of Family and Support Services. We're trying to get those who are willing to go into transitional housing. We have open shelter beds across the city, particularly because we've flexed with the need to social distance in our shelters and bring other facilities online. That team also has folks who have knowledge about addiction and mental health. And so we're going to continue to do that outreach. But what I'll also say is, there's been a lot of conversation over the course of these last 6 to 8 weeks about public transportation. Public transportation is vital to our essential workers. It is vital to our first responders and our healthcare workers. They rely upon the buses and the trains, and many of them don't have cars. So public transportation is their means to be mobile in a challenging environment. There are people that work the overnight shift. So closing down essentially during that critical time period for some would mean that would be the difference between them being able to actually get to work or not. And not everybody has the resources to be able to call up a rideshare company. So public transportation is really, really important. I feel very confident in the leadership of President Dorval Carter and his team. We're in regular conversation with them about what more we can do, not only to support the members of the Amalgamated Transit Union and the other employees of the CTA, but making sure that we're doing everything to keep the CTA safe and clean for ridership. So I don't see us taking that step for the reasons that I've articulated.
Question from my colleague Stacy Baca. Your position on the 1997 Rent Control Preemption Act, which prohibits local governments from regulating apartment rents. In the midst of a pandemic, should this ban on rent control be lifted?
Well, as you know, there's a lot of conversation about that, and I certainly understand where the proponents are of lifting the ban because, not surprisingly, when people are losing their job, when their hours are cut back, one of the first things that is a challenge is meeting the rent or mortgage payments. As you know, yesterday we announced a solidarity pledge, which brought the lenders, the renter advocates, and as well as homeowners, landlords, real estate agents all together to sign a pledge, many of them were already doing all along. But the point of this is to give some relief to renters, to mortgage holders, and bringing all the stakeholders together. I'm very proud of the commitment that all of these various stakeholders have made. Now, at the local level, there's only so much we can do. The crisis that I fear, not only around rent, but on mortgages and potentially foreclosure, that is something that has to be addressed at the federal level. And we're going to keep pushing our federal representatives and anybody else who will listen to say, if we want to avoid what happened in 2008 and 2009, we have got to see this crisis that is looming and growing coming and do things now to help mitigate that. We're doing everything we can at the local level, but our tools are limited. We need federal assistance on this pressing issue, and rent relief has got to be a part of that.
Those are all the questions I had from other reporters. I would just ask you from a historical perspective, what do you think was the reason that we shrunk down to 3 police areas in the first place 7, 8 years ago, and was that a failed experiment?
Well, I don't know exactly what the rationale was, but what I can tell you is, I was saying as I walked in here, the last time I walked into this building, I was a federal prosecutor, and I was coming over here to work with the police department because we had a big takedown in a drug conspiracy case. So it brings back memories walking into this building, and I'm happy to say it's a little different and a lot cleaner than it was back in those days. But what we know is this. It was difficult for our detectives in particular, but also our police officers to travel great distances when you only have three areas. I gave the example earlier of having one of the areas literally touch our western border and then also go to our lakeshore. Just spanning that geography alone, and that was just one of the areas, was a challenge. And what I think this new configuration does is it brings detectives and line police officers closer together. It certainly cuts down on travel time, but more importantly, I think it has the potential to build even greater relationships and synergies between the frontline police officer who have a lot of knowledge and intelligence about what's going on in their districts, and then be able to work more collaboratively with the detectives who are then brought in when something happens to investigate these crimes, particularly around homicides and shootings. I am very confident that it's going to yield a lot of dividends, help making the work much more efficient, and already with the ATCs, as I mentioned, I can't speak highly enough of those. And again, thanks goes to Ken Griffin and the Chicago Crime Lab and the others who are responsible for harnessing the technology to help our detectives be able to operate that much more efficiently. And the technology that's in these rooms is phenomenal. I mean, I talked about just being able to have the ability to look at different video formats, but there's a lot of technology in those rooms, and I won't give away all the secrets, but when you see it, it is amazing what can be done now with the technology to shrink the investigative time really down significantly. And so there have been a number of cases that have now been charged by the state's attorney's office directly as a result of the ability of detectives to use that technology, whether it's license plate reading or others. I mean, it's phenomenal stuff, and more to come. I want to make sure that our police department has the best gold standard and technology and other resources to be able to do their jobs effectively and keep our communities safe.
If I can ask Superintendent Brown, obviously you're coming into this, this has been planned in the works since before you came on board, but it seems just from our observations that it fits in well with your philosophy in the first place. Is that true?
That's very true. You know, I've really been having a lot of conversations with people around the police department, and my takeaway is it feels like I'm Phil Jackson coaching Michael Jordan. You know what I mean? I'm trying to be Zen master and figure out how to bubble up the talent and innovation and creativity to win the game, meaning building trust in the community while decreasing crime to historic levels. That's really the challenge. That's the goal. And I've just been so excited with the conversations I've had with the talent, not just in this room, in this department throughout, not just the command staff at ranks, but also down the rank and file, officers, sergeants, lieutenants, captains. It's a very talented group. And bringing out the best in these people will make Chicagoans proud.
And now I almost forgot.
I'm hiding in the corner, Mayor. From WBZ, and I'm going to couple it with a question from Shia as well. As changes to the stay-at-home order go into effect tomorrow, are there changes to Chicago's stay-at-home order as well? For example, will parks and golf courses in the city remain closed? And then to piggyback off of that, does the city have plans to allow folks to go to the beaches this summer?
Well, I don't want to get ahead of myself and talk about the summer since we're just on the cusp of May. But for the time being, I anticipate that we're going to stay the course with the various stay-at-home restrictions that have been in place now for a little over 30 days. We've made a lot of progress, there's no doubt about that, but we're not at a place yet until we start to see not just a elongating of the curve, a flattening of the curve. We have to see a decrease in the number of cases, a decrease in the number of deaths, a decrease in the number of COVID-related patients that are occupying ICU beds and on ventilators. We're making progress, no doubt, but we're not there yet. I know that people are anxious. I'm anxious too. It's supposed to be very warm this weekend, which presents challenges and opportunities. But we have gotten to where we've gotten because people have stayed home. They've gotten, I think the vast majority of Chicagoans have gotten the message that restricting our movements, avoiding large congregate settings, particularly ones where you can't social distance easily, those are the very breeding grounds for the virus. And I'm watching very carefully, not just across Illinois, but really across the country and the world, places where they came out of these restrictions too soon, they've seen a spike. Most recently, for example, in Germany. Germany had very rigid restrictions around movements. They announced with great fanfare about a week ago that they were opening up their cities and towns and the whole country, and what's happened? They've seen a spike in cases. We can't open up and then have to close back down. Psychologically, I don't think people could handle that. So I'm just asking people to hang in there a little bit longer, be patient, and we are going to be as transparent as we can, and as soon as we are able to open back up, again, it won't be a light switch. It'll be a gradual turning of the dimmer switch, and we will open back up in a way that's responsible and really consistent with the public health data.
Another combined question, Mayor, regarding the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals that ruled the Trump administration cannot yank federal funds from Chicago because it prohibits officers from cooperating with federal immigration agents. First question is the city prepared to defend this ruling at the Supreme Court? And the follow-up question to that is, how much was spent on the fight versus what the city will receive in grants, and what is the grant money used for?
I don't have at my fingertips the amount of money that was spent in the defense of it, but we can get that to you. I will tell you, when I got the news from our Corporation Counsel earlier this morning, I let out a cheer. And I have to give credit to former Mayor Rahm Emanuel for really understanding the importance of fighting this fight, and former Corporation Counsel Ed Siskel, when putting together a team that understood that we could not be dictated to simply because we embrace who we are as a city. We embrace our immigrants and refugees. So this is a great victory, not only for Chicago, but for our immigrant and refugee communities everywhere in the country. This is a piece of litigation that's been followed by cities and towns all across the nation, and I am really, really grateful that we've gotten this ruling now from the Seventh Circuit. And yes, if the Department of Justice would seek an appeal to the Supreme Court, we'll be right there with them and making sure that we advocate again for our immigrants and refugees. We won this case at the district court level, and the judge entered a nationwide injunction, and now the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals has affirmed that decision in a 112-page ruling. I can't say that I've read every page yet, but I will. And this is an important day for our city.
Last two questions. Mayor, what plans this is from Kelly Bauer at Block Club. Mayor, what plans do you have for getting masks and face coverings specifically to low-income Chicagoans?
So we've been doing that all along. We have heightened those efforts through our racial equity rapid response teams, and we are in the process of placing an order for 1 million face coverings for residents, and obviously we're going to put a premium on residents of needs. We're going to be passing out to the 50 aldermen face coverings, and in the interim we've put masks in their hands, but we're going to be living with masks for the duration. I see that happening certainly over the course of the summer and the fall, and maybe even until next year before we see a vaccine come online. I don't believe in issuing mandates and not giving people the tools to be compliant. So as a city, we are stepping up, and we will be making sure that our residents have the kind of face coverings that they need to be able to protect themselves when they go outside of their homes and can't safely social distance, for example, at grocery stores.
Last question from Shruti at Bloomberg. Mayor Lightfoot, other cities around the country have outlined layoffs or furloughs given low revenue. You've commented on this in the past, but can you give us an update on what to expect now? Any cuts in headcount, pay, or hours for city employees?
Well, I view, as somebody who worked in city government back in the 2000s, in days where there were mandatory furlough days and there were layoffs, that's demoralizing to your workforce. And I've said this before, I believe to the extent that we can, city government and state government and federal governments should be acting as a catalyst to spur economic growth. And I think that that's needed now more than ever. Now, we're not going to spend beyond our means, but I want to make sure that we are responsibly using taxpayer dollars. But we know that we have a role to play in helping stimulate the economy. So those are some of the things that we're looking at. I can't tell you yet what the full magnitude of the impact is on our 2020 budget, and we don't start our formal process of looking ahead to 2021 until really the end of May, beginning of June. But as I've said multiple times, every single day, our finance team, our chief financial officer, our budget director are looking at what the different revenue streams are, how they've been impacted, and of course, some of our revenue streams have been significantly impacted. Our hospitality and service industries have really been decimated by the forced closures of those businesses, and we understand that. However, there have been other industries that have either remained the status quo or have seen an uptick in their revenues. And grocery stores in particular, I think, are doing an incredible business, as are some of the other big box stores that have been able to be open during this very difficult time. So sorting all that through is something that we're looking at every single day and working hard on. And once we have a better handle on what the impacts are, we will certainly share that with members of the public. But I view layoffs and furloughs as a last resort. Well, last is raising property taxes.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, thank you.